This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Hello, welcome to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. This is our special Fight the Future Minute podcast. I am your host, Marlene Stemme. You are listening to our coverage of minute 91 of the X-Files Fight the Future. This minute begins at 90 minutes with Mulder crawling through a dark ice tunnel and ends at 90 minutes and 59 seconds with Mulder looking at the cryopods along the corridor and reaching out to touch one of them. To discuss this minute, I'm joined by X-Cast patron Annie Flowers. Hey Annie, welcome to Fight the Future Minute.
Hi, so good to be back.
Good to have you back. So we are going to rejoin Mulder as he is crawling down the tunnel of ice, and he's kind of making his way into what they're calling the alien corridor. So he's crawling along, and he's in a tunnel that's really only slightly wider than the circumference of his body. So the tunnel seems claustrophobic, but Mulder has already fallen through the ice, been running on the ice, done all of the sort of physical things. So he's just forging ahead through this tunnel in the dark.
He is a trooper.
Yes. And the biggest challenges are still yet to come, but at this point he's been through a lot. So Mulder reaches the end of the tunnel and he peers over the end of what looks like a large pipe. So we've kind of been in this very natural setting with the snow and the ice, and even the falling through the hole part. It looks like that could just be the ice being hollow in some sort of very natural area underground. And then we see this large pipe, and then he turns himself around and lowers himself down from this big pipe that has all this mist, much more mist swirling around it. And he's dropping into a hallway that's lined on both sides with pods, and the pods are emitting a green light.
Yes, and I actually have something about that from the making of the Fight the Future book. I have here that according to the making of Fight the Future, the massive greenish color structure had been most challenging of all the set design because the script was very vague about what it should look like. The action in the script moved from one nondescript area to another. Also, they mentioned this greenish color, which Chris Carter ended up really liking. So they had a bit of trouble with the use of the green screens in this. Are we on green yet?
Well, they talk in the book, from what I remember, about they're going to do a green screen. And David Duchovny was wearing a blue outfit. And so they thought this will be perfect because it's not going to contrast with anything.
That's right.
And then they started using this green lighting. And Chris Carter was like, I really like the green lighting. And so there was nothing else to be done except use green and blue, just like wherever there wasn't green lighting, they use blue and that type of thing. So I think it's good.
Okay.
That's the only part that I just remember that with the green screen.
Yes.
So the having to kind of modify like the whole movie through from what, and I remember, it's funny because I remember reading this and hearing about it when they were filming at the time. Like, I mean, I only remember it very vaguely because it's a long time ago, but I vaguely remember them being on like the sort of the crunch that they always seem to be on to film everything in time, and everything is having to be adjusted and improvised, and they're working, all hours and so forth. And so by this point, it almost seems like, this is no different. We're going to have to make a change and kind of work on the fly, So you have these people that are hardworking and very experienced, but they think they have the plan of what's going to happen to do the green screen. But yeah, so having to just kind of like make do with things as they emerged in the filming.
And it seems that there were a lot of things changing, shoot times moving up a day or two. Like we said, the color green becoming more prominent with the cryopods. Mm-hmm. Chris Carter really liked it. And so was it Matt Beck who was like, okay, I guess we're doing green now. And so he had to kind of figure that out as he went along as well. It seems like it was a pretty hectic shoot, although I'm sure most movie sets are pretty hectic.
Yeah. So the Mulder drops down into that. The pods are emitting this green light, and the pods are approximately the height of people. And at this point, we can't quite see what they are. as they're lined along the corridor, but it just gives that ominous sense that he might have found the beginnings of what he's looking for.
So he's in this corridor. There are a lot of these cryopods. We're not quite sure what they are yet. He's about to go check. But how many people are missing? And is this like a thing? Are people being reported missing all throughout the world? Because that's not just 5 people. That's a whole row.
Right. It's a whole, like, 2 sides of, like, 2 rows, so one on each side.
Right.
And he just sees those people because that's where he happened to drop into the ice and climb down the pipe and so forth. And, you know, he kind of sees a little bit more of how expansive it is coming up. But I think that's a great point. It's like, people must be missing from many locations. You know, it's like, it's the idea that you don't know the scope of what this project is.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems like it would be an epidemic.
Oh, yeah. That's what you would think. Like, missing persons reports everywhere. And so Mulder shines his flashlight, which is heartening to me to know that he brought a flashlight with him, that he had that forethought, just like the binoculars that we talked about before.
He is prepared.
He's very prepared. He's prepared for, not adventure, but like sort of duress adventure, I guess. And he has the, you know, what looks, at least in the filming of this, like one of the powerful flashlights, which is good. So he's shining the flashlight down the corridor, and then he's looking at all of these pods as he passes them. And so to me, it kind of seems like he's giving him like a glance to see what they are, and then he starts to sort of look a little more closely at them. And in the midst of this, you're seeing this sort of this mist, this icy mist, again, swirl through the hallway and the corridor. I love the effect of that, and I like how that's used in all of these kind of underground scenes. Mm-hmm. And then in the last seconds, Mulder reaches out to touch one of the pods, and then he starts to wipe away the layer of ice from the cryopod, and it reveals this face that has this large plastic tube going into its mouth. So you know he's found something. Yeah,
he knows he's in the right place. It's absolutely terrifying. What are they doing with these people?
And it's not Scully, but then it just gives this indication of, like, that's, you know, her eventual fate as well if he finds her.
Right. Which seems like a pretty daunting task at this point, given how many pods we've seen so far.
Right. And you get the idea that Mulder's figuring out this is a lot larger than he had expected it to be. And he just kind of happened upon the area that he fell into.
Very lucky.
Yeah.
Right.
But who knows, like, where he is or where she is.
Right.
At this point. So, is there anything else that you wanted to say about this particular minute, Annie?
I think that's about it for this one.
Okay. Well, then that is all for this Fight the Future Minute. We'll be back next time for Minute 92, for which I will once again be joined by Annie. In the meantime, where can our listeners follow you on social media?
Yes, I am on Twitter at Annie A. Flowers, and I am often lurking in the basement, sometimes commenting on the Facebook XCast group.
Okay, thank you. I am on Twitter at Marlene MHS and on Facebook in the XCast Basement group. So thanks to our listeners for listening. Thank you, Annie, for joining me. And until next time, trust no one.
Elsewhere on We Made This. The giddy carousel of pop.
So there's just one thing we need to know. Where were you on the 13th of July, 1985?
I definitely watched the whole of Live Aid, sat 2 inches away from the telly. My mum and my stepdad and my stepsister coming in and out and trying to prise me away from the telly and not really managing.
I was in Wembley. I took a day off work. They didn't believe I was going. I had to show them the ticket.
Went to a dog show at Malvern. And saw Auntie Sandra and Uncle Jeff.
I was there. Me and a school friend went. My mum and dad drove us down. They had a day in London. We went to the concert.
The Movie Palace.
So, Carl, what is White Heat about for you?
For me, it's about where the gangster genre is at this point in time. And I think one of the interesting things to look at with gangster films is always like, how do they take the temperature of the time that they're made? So I suppose it comes at a very interesting time in terms of, like, globally, doesn't it? You have the proclamation of the People's Republic of China, you have the Soviet Union testing the atomic bomb, stuff like that, So there's something interesting about this film, which ends with this big explosion at the chemical factory, which comes along at this time of, like, nuclear tension.
Between the Notes.
I think it's important to remember throughout the 1990s into the early 2000s, there were loads and loads of chill-out albums that were released, like repeatedly. They were all over the place. My dad always used to collect those. He used to buy them. And Morricone was always on those, which is another sign of how remarkable he was. He could cross over into the mainstream populist sphere, and the score for The Mission was always on those albums, particularly Gabriel's oboe, which is an interesting story. I looked this up. So Jeremy Irons plays the character of Gabriel in the movie, and he performs the oboe. Well, he mimes playing the oboe in the film, and then that's obviously overdubbed with the music.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.